What's up, guys? Welcome to Flix Mix. I'm one of your hosts, Harrison, and I'm joined by.
Josh.
So basically, this is a podcast where we're going to talk about movies, discuss what they're about, what we like and dislike, and just general thoughts. It's going to be definitely like a conversation between the two of us. Josh, you have anything you want to add?
Oh yeah, I think we just both really like movies, so what better place to talk about it than a podcast? So we're gonna do our best to give our overall thoughts and opinions on movies and talk about what we like about them or dislike about them.
All right. So before we talk about our first movie, which we will reveal in a second, I just kind of wanted to, I guess, intro the both of us. So my question to you was what really got you into movies, or what what's like the event or the movie, the one movie that you saw that got you super interested?
Yeah, so my parents really liked watching movies, so obviously I grew up watching like all kinds of movies. I mean, there wasn't really like it wasn't they always were going to the movies, so like I remember I think my mom said that like my first movie like we saw in theaters was like Ice Age, and I was legit like a baby, and then I remember going to see the Simpsons movie in theaters and just like a bunch of old movie. I just always remembered like growing up kind of in movie theaters and watching movies at home, and then my parents like would always buy me movies for like my birthday or whatever. So I've always like kind of grown up with movies, and then I think the movie that really like for the first time like made me think about like how movies are made and like that there's more to movies than just like what you see on screen, like behind the scenes. And that was Django Unchained. I
Right.
watched I watched 2012 Christmas Day um,
In the theaters or just
in
at
the
home?
theaters, because there's like it was always a tradition to go to the theaters on Christmas growing up. So I remember I was in Kansas visiting some family, and me and my cousin and my aunt and uncle, like we all saw Django Unchained, and I just remember that just being the most epic movie I've ever seen. Just like it's bloody, it's over the top, it's crazy, and
That's
I
like
was
a
just
really
like,
that's a really brutal movie. You were like 10 years old, weren't
I
you?
was 10. No, I was 10 and I loved it. And I just like I didn't understand obviously like really any of like the whole plot or anything, but like that's probably why that's like one of my favorite movies now, because it's like I was so glued, like I'd never been glued to like a screen like that, and I immediately like wanted to watch it as soon as I was done. And it was like crazy because it was like, typically like that'd be like it was pretty graphic for like a, how old we are, but that was just kind of like just a movie we wanted to see. Like my parents are, or like my family, like they all love westerns and stuff. So they're like, all right, yeah, sure. But then it's like I don't think they were really like they didn't really know about Quentin Tarantino and stuff like that. So it's just like, we're gonna go see a western with Jamie Foxx. Looks pretty dope, and then it turned out being like one of my favorite movies. So
That's cool. That's kind of, I just think that's funny how Django Unchained is like the one movie. You were 10
I
years
know
old, saw it
I
on
was
Christmas
10.
Day, and then that was like, that sparked everything.
Dude, I thought it was so sick that like, an ex-slave is just like murdering a bunch of, just
I haven't
going on a
seen it.
killing spree.
I haven't seen
Oh,
it.
you've never seen it? Oh,
I
okay.
know
So
like a lot about it
yeah,
just because Quentin Tarantino's legend, but I have not
right.
seen it. So definitely one that I'll have to watch. Maybe one we'll talk about since you love it so much.
Yeah.
I guess to answer my own question, I'd have to say the same. Me and my parents and my sister, we always grew up going to movies and stuff. And definitely, like, my dad is a big part of like my love for movies. He's always like watched a bunch of movies at home, and always like I loved when he would ask me to like watch a movie, and I just see him like I remember vivid memories of him like quoting movies while we were watching them before the actors, or I guess the characters, would say them. Like
Yeah.
he would do that with the movie Gladiator, because that's like one of his favorites. And I was like, just those times where I got to go to the movies was just like the best time ever. Like, I do it with my friends, I do it with my family. I love to go to the movies. It's like one of my favorite things to do. And just the experience of going to the movies and seeing something like a story that maybe it's not realistic, or maybe it is realistic, and it just like emotionally just connects with you some way. I think that's always like something that I've loved. And I guess my insight right now, or I guess more perspective of where I'm at in school, I am a film and television student at Xavier University. So I kind of got into making movies, I guess maybe short film, just funny videos. Senior year when we took film studies, I think you were in film studies, but we were in a
Yeah.
different class.
Hmm.
So I just had a great time doing that with my friends, and it was like that was kind of the thing that sparked my personal journey, where I kind of decided to go study it and how to make movies. And yeah, I mean that's kind of it. Right now I'm a sophomore, so we haven't like we're still learning everything. The first year we learned how to like edit, so we learned like software and stuff and some graphics. And then this year we've gotten a lot more into like production, which has been really really cool. So I had to learn how to like work a camera, like a expensive camera, a nice camera, like tripods, set up that stuff. I have lighting. Lighting is something that people don't talk about, but is super 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 hard, and I absolutely hate lighting because it's like the worst thing ever, but it's super important. I've learned how to use microphones, so LAV mics, which is like the ones you'll attach to a person that'll be like just attached to like their shirt or under their shirt, so you can hear them.
Yeah, sure.
Like hidden mics, and then boom mics, the ones that you hold. Um, I'm trying to think of what else. So we've learned how to use dollies, which is like where you can move the
Like a
camera.
track.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. So we just learned that like 2 weeks ago. So very very basic stuff, but when you put it all together, it's really cool, and we get to make short films. Like literally, our homework is make movies and make nonfiction films and documentaries, which is like super fun. And so I've worked on definitely a lot of short films, collaborative short films. I've just yesterday I literally worked on an actual commercial. Like our whole class got together and filmed a commercial for a some kind of bakery company, which was really cool. And one of the jobs I got to do was director of photography, where I got to man the camera on the dolly, which was cool.
That's
And
dope.
then I worked as a gaffer, so I worked with some lights. And then just different jobs. We switched around because everybody kind of it's easier when everybody gets to learn every job.
Right.
Um, but yeah, that's just kind of like my background. I watch movies all the time, and I rewatch movies all the time. Uh,
So do you think that like being in school for like making films and stuff, do you think that's made it have you seen a difference when you watch movies now as of before when like you didn't know as much about like lighting and stuff like that? Like do you watch movies differently now or do you try not to do that?
no, I that's a great question. I love to do that. It honestly has made like watching movies so much more fun because when you obviously watching a movie and just appreciating it for what it is and the story and just being fully immersed in it is really fun. But like if I rewatch something, I can like kind of analyze some things, like different things. And of course, I'm not like a professional, so I don't know everything. But I like to like see what they do. Like lighting, like is super important. Obviously, I just said that, and like audio, and just seeing what I have to do in my class and how hard it is, and then seeing how professionals do it, but like so much to the like such a great quality, and they just what they put out there is so amazing. And then I like tie it back to me, like I want to be able to do what they do. I appreciate what they do because I know how hard it is more. I can
Right.
definitely appreciate like making a movie because like we literally shot I think like 30 seconds yesterday and it took us like 3 hours.
That's
And
crazy. And imagine
and
making a 3-hour movie.
yeah, imagine making a movie which takes months. Like I can't even like fathom that. But definitely like just like watching movies and appreciating that, appreciating all the hard work that goes into it. And then credits, you see credits go by at the end of the movie, people walk out, you turn the movie off, but like
Right.
those are all the people that worked hours and hours and hours. And
Exactly. I mean, even stuff with like makeup and costume design, like that's all part of the process. And I always thought I wanted to be like a movie critic because like, oh, you get paid to just watch movies all day. But then I realized that like it like how who am I to like judge somebody's like work that's like so personal to them? You know what I mean? Like obviously there's trash movies and like but I'd hate to like be on that judgment. Now, obviously, like that's what we're gonna probably do in like this podcast, but it's like it's more personal to us. Like we're just gonna, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like we might
well,
watch a bad movie, but like
we're
we're not being critical in the sense of like style and stuff like that. I don't think.
we're critiquing movies, but we're also, I feel like we're gonna pick movies that we generally like enjoy. I think it'd be funny to do an episode where we do a movie that is terrible, and
Yeah,
we
I think
can
so too.
maybe go into why it sucked. But yeah, movie reviewers, I don't really know much about that job, but I can't imagine like everybody that is like a film critic has worked in the industry because
Well,
I
yeah,
don't
and I mean, I was a kid too, so I just thought that you see their quotes like on the front of a movie, like if you buy it, it's like best movie of the year from like you know some random dude in the New York Times, and it's like that. I thought that's it's like they just get paid to watch movies, and that's kind of what I wanted to do, but I'd much rather just do it for fun.
Yeah, I mean, I I have no interest in being like a film critic because what
Yeah,
their job is to literally take something like a movie
that's
and then pick apart like and nitpick every bad thing so they can give people this review that I don't really think is always reflective of what the movie is. There's a
yeah,
lot of good movies that get bad reviews that I enjoy. So I
exactly.
think you can sit there and you can like nitpick a movie and pick out all the things that you don't like or that was done wrong. But like, I don't know, in the grand scheme of things, if the movie was entertaining, I think it was successful. Or I guess if the movie made money, it obviously was entertaining, so it was successful.
Right.
So I don't know. I don't know how I feel about like movie critics, but I
Well, and
mean,
the thing
I guess
is
that
it
is what we're doing. So
which
it's a
well
weird.
the best part of it is like it's so subjective. Like there's no way to like actually I mean, I know there can be like a general idea if most people have the same opinion, but like for like a reason you don't like a movie might be the reason I like the movie. You know what I mean? Whether
Yeah,
it's you might find a problem with pacing, but like I never wanted it to end, stuff like that. And I think um just being able to like just have your opinion, I think it's just important. Like that's kind of why movies are made, is for the audience. At the end of the day, it's for the audience. So like this is what it's for. Like you watch it and you form your own opinion, which is going to be a main theme. Also, going into movies not knowing, like not looking at reviews before you watch a movie, I think is important. And I mean, even trailers, like so many trailers now, it's like they go so overboard, and it's like, I mean, spoils the whole movie. I mean, you see like 3 4 minute trailers
yeah. I hate
that
them.
just
The
like,
trailers that
yeah,
they
and
show and then they reveal the whole thing, and it's like, really? Did you really have to do that?
right, and they'll do that just to get you into the movie. Whereas like Batman, they don't really need to do that. So like their trailers are super dope because like
Yeah.
it's supposed to be like you know mysterious and like not show you too much.
I mean, I would say that like the movies that do like show most of the story in the trailer, I think they're just trying to like get people to go see it more and they have to reveal more because people know less. You know, like
Right,
Spider-Man No Way Home, of course, they didn't have to show anything, but and people will still would
right.
have it still would have like broke the box office. Like it still would have done
Hmm.
that no matter what they showed in the trailer. But like I guess the what's that one movie that's coming out with Jake Gyllenhaal and like the bank robbery?
The ambulance.
The ambulance or something. Yeah,
Yeah,
like that trailer shows everything, and it literally like completely turns me off of the movie because it's like I already have seen it basically because you showed me all the most important parts in the trailer, and I'm sure that like obviously trailers aren't edited by. I don't really think they're. I think editors, movie trailer editors, are just hired by the like people, random people.
yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know what their directions are, but I don't know.
Correction.
I don't
It's
really
actually
know what I was.
just
I don't know really know where I was going with that, but
it's just ambulance. It's not the ambulance, but yeah, April 8th. Mark your calendars. That's it. Yeah, no, I know what you're saying though. It's like it, especially nowadays, like early in the year, like the people, they're struggling to get people into the theaters anyways, because that's why blockbusters are all in the summer because that's when people have most free time, and
Yeah.
so that's when the biggest movies are going to be released. But now it's like even the new Uncharted movie, which I think is going to be, I mean, pretty
Uh,
entertaining. I
I don't
don't
know.
know. I mean, Mark Wahlberg and Tom Holland, but I've seen like that's all I see is just trailers of that, and it's like I kind of know where it's going at that point, but um,
All
who
right.
knows?
Yeah. I guess that's a pretty good intro. We could obviously, if people reach out and are like, please talk more about this stuff, but I think
Yeah.
it's a good segue into the first movie that we're going to talk about. Do you want to reveal it, or I can reveal it? But
Yeah,
do you
I'll
want
go
to tell a
ahead.
story of like how we are talking about this movie? Because
Okay, yeah. So, me and Harrison, we've been talking, and we both knew that like we're big like movie fans, obviously, and um, I started like talking to him like, "Oh, have you seen this movie?" And he's like, "No." And he's like, "Have you seen this movie?" And I'm like, "No." So it's like, all right, what we wanted to do was we wanted to give each other like, 1 to 2 recommendations of movies, and then like, we'll give each other like 2 weeks to watch it, and then talk about the movies that So he recommended to me Goodfellas and Close Encounters of the Third Kind. Those are two
of
movies that
course,
I haven't seen that he would recommend to me because he obviously thinks highly of those films. So and then I recommended to him Harrison Good.
you recommended Arrival, which I still haven't seen. I think it's on Hulu. I'm gonna watch it soon. Maybe we can do an episode on it, depending on how I like it, because I gotta watch it and form my own opinion. Which is, I hope you guys are ready for us to repeat, watch, and form your own opinion over and over again, because that's gonna be like the tagline of this. But anyways, you recommended Arrival, which has got like Amy Adams isn't in it, right?
Yeah, and Jeremy Renner,
Yeah. So
Hawkeye.
Hawkeye and redhead actress. And then you recommended Donnie Darko, which is the subject of today's podcast, today's episode. The first episode of Flix Mix is about Donnie Darko. So, do you want to, I guess, tell the story of how or when you first saw it, or
Yeah, so Donnie Darko, and I think this is for a lot of people, and this is why I think this is even our first episode, is if it's not a real popular movie, I think to like the general, like I think most people probably that are just like baseline level movie watchers haven't seen it, or like they haven't even been able to see it. Like it's not really a movie that gets advertised a lot, but it's um it's a cult. It's categorized as a cult classic, meaning there's a following out there that like really likes this movie and really like not worships this movie, but they love this movie and they will die by this movie of like it's underrated, it's complex. And in film studies in high school, we one of our categories of movies that we were watching was a cult classic, and nobody in the class had seen Donnie Darko. So our teacher, Mr. Lash, he basically he's like, all right, well then this is a perfect movie, and we watched it in class over 2 days, I think, and it like blew my mind because it's a movie that, without getting too into it right now, it's just
it's
there's
crazy?
so
It's a
it's
crazy
it's
movie.
crazy. There's so many layers, and it's a movie that like none of us had even heard about. So it was cool to be able to like watch it for the first time in that setting and just kind of try to take everything in, even though it's almost impossible. And then, so then after that, like I fell in love with the movie. I got it on Blu-ray. I've watched it a couple times since, and then it's a movie that I talked to Harrison about, and he's
Yeah,
being a big movie guy, like you've heard about it.
yeah, I heard about it, but I didn't. I knew it was one of those like cult classic movies, and I might have watched like a Watch Mojo of like top 10 most confusing movies, and it was on there, but I didn't. I really had no idea what it was about. So, and I guess even now watching it, I still don't know what it's about, which is
Exactly.
pretty fun. But
So pretty much, yeah. So the reason we want to do this as a first episode of I think it's a perfect movie to get into if you really want to start like going down that rabbit hole of movies that you know um, that aren't as popular but are still really really good, and that like has a following that there's theories and there's questions, and it's ambiguous in a way. I think this is a perfect movie, and hopefully, if you haven't seen the movie, just go ahead and try your best to watch it before listening to the rest of this episode, and form your own opinion and form your own theories, because once we get into this, it's going to be hard to not spoil anything. So
Yeah, we're definitely gonna have to do a deep dive. So before we, I guess, get into our, we're gonna do a spoiler free, and then we're gonna do a spoiler review.
yeah,
Okay,
yeah,
so before we do that, I just wanted to like give out some random facts about it. It was made in 2001, and it stars Jake Gyllenhaal, Maggie Gyllenhaal, his sister, who's also a famous actress. If you did not know, she was in she was in Batman: The Dark Knight. She
she
w-
was
with
she was Rachel.
Yeah, she was
Rachel.
Rachel in The Dark Knight, if you remember. And then Jake Gyllenhaal obviously is super famous. Both of them are super famous. But they're really young in that. I think Jake Gyllenhaal was 19,
19, yeah.
and
And she
then
was just a little older because she's his older sister. So she was probably 20s, you know.
yeah, and then I guess the other big name is Patrick Swayze. Uh, he's just like, one of those actors from the 80s and 90s that are like super big. And then I can't really think of anybody else that was in that.
Well, it
That's
also has like, there's a bunch of side characters in this. Obviously, it focuses on Jake Gyllenhaal, but there's also Drew Barrymore. Um,
Yeah. I was trying to give like the big names, but
oh, yeah,
if
yeah,
you
yeah.
want to be,
And
yeah.
then, and Seth Rogen makes his
Oh yeah,
film,
Seth Rogen's in the movie.
his first ever film appearance. His first ever role as a serious actor was in Donnie Darko.
Yeah. So the movie was directed by Richard Kelly, and he was 25 years old when he made this movie. He was a recent grad of USC, University of Southern California, which, if you don't know anything about being a film student, that's like the school to be at, like the top film school, because Hollywood is in California and all that stuff. But anyways, so I watched an interview with him, and he was just talking about like what's the best way to get into the film industry and to be a director. And he just concluded that to write a good script, and that's exactly what he did. He wrote Donnie Darko, which I can't even like imagine the first script you write after you graduate from college. I guess maybe a few years after you graduated. I don't know if it was the 4 year or was a graduate student.
Yeah,
Um, but being 25, writing Donnie Darko as your first screenplay, and then a couple months later making it into a movie at 25 years old is like super young, and I think that's like absolutely insane and super
yeah.
impressive. So he was 25, and the movie has an 86% on Rotten Tomatoes. So I don't know if people really take Rotten Tomatoes seriously anymore, because I think there's been so many instances where like bad movies have gotten good reviews and good movies
Good
have gotten
movie.
bad
Yeah,
reviews.
I think
I think
86 is probably pretty appropriate. As far as not in my opinion, but like thinking about like 86% of critics liked it. I think
yeah,
that's pretty fair. Probably. I think there's. I mean, I'd say the other 14% probably had no idea what was even like. I don't know what their thoughts on that movie was, but it makes sense. I think this is a pretty hot cold movie of like, there's people that walk away that hated it, and then there's people that walk away and they didn't know how they felt, but
yeah.
I
I
think
just
it's
think
pretty cool.
some people aren't into like the ambiguous ending, and that's kind of like this whole movie is just ambiguous in and itself. So the movie, it made only 7.5 million at the box office,
On a
which
$4 million budget,
yeah,
which
which
is
is it's successful, but like in the grand scheme of things, like in today's world where Spider-Man comes out and makes like billions of dollars across the world, it's not super big, but it is a successful movie. And I also don't know how big the release was. I don't know how popular this movie was because obviously
well.
I wasn't born yet. So
So I did some research on that, and well, first off, the reason it was able to get funded because reading this script, I mean, you don't understand how this movie is going to work out, or and even if it does like get made, who's going to go out and watch this movie? So it actually got most of its funding because the same company the year before released Passion of the Christ, and that made a boatload of money. So they were able to use kind of some of that money from that company to make this movie. So that was kind of the main reason why it got funded. And then when it got released, it did not do well the first weekend. And then kind of after a month, it was kind of a dud. And then they said all of a sudden, like in London, like a bunch of people started seeing it, and then that's kind of how it got this following. So like it got most of its box office like towards the latter half of its release, and it wasn't even in America. It was in it was in London. So
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. I guess, do you want to start talking about non-spoiler review of it? I
yeah. So I'm gonna hopefully we're gonna try to do this for each movie, but I just want to give a one sentence summary. I don't know if you have one prepared or not,
Yeah, I can come up with one.
um, but just trying to condense, all these movies that we watch. I want to try to get it down to one sentence that like, what is this movie about? So to sum up Donnie Darko in one sentence, I said it is about a troubled teenager that takes life advice from a 6 foot rabbit named Frank. Which
Yeah.
I mean that's I'm not wrong. I mean that is what the movie's about. So
I mean, that's probably what I was gonna say. Is just like a troubled teen that possibly suffers from schizophrenia talks to a rabbit, and the rabbit tells him that the world is gonna end in like 28 days. Like that's
yeah,
about as much as I can tell you. Like, as like a summary, that's like it's not even that like I don't know how to describe the movie. It's just like that's the only way that I
that's all you can talk
can.
about without getting into right. But as far as non-spoiler reviews, you're gonna get great acting. I think, especially from Jake Gyllenhaal. Obviously, I
Yeah,
think he is a perfect cast because he's a likable guy. He's not. I wouldn't even call him like an anti-hero or whatever, but like he's a guy that like at times in the movie like you really feel for him, and then at other times he just has this look on your face like he's a complete psychopath.
yeah.
Um,
The
which
shots where
is
he just kind of like looks into the camera, they call that like the Kubrick stare, because
yeah,
Stanley Kubrick did that like a million times in like every one of his movies, where they just kind
right.
of like they don't. I don't know if they look directly into the camera or they kind of look like right by the lens, but where they just do that, it's like when it's done right, it's super cool, and that's done like a million times in this movie.
Oh yeah, and I even heard that like Jake Gyllenhaal like practiced like not blinking. Like it's hard to see a shot like when he's going through these stages. I'll call them stages, where he just does not blink, and it's something you don't notice until like it's pointed out to you. But it's like I saw that and then I like watched a couple scenes. I was like, oh yeah, he's just not blinking, and it's really creepy, and you like don't understand. But yeah, you're gonna get great acting. You can kind of talk on the score, like
Yeah,
it's
it's like
so
the score is obviously it's not like super like memorable. It's just kind of like that weird, not horror, but maybe kind of a little bit of horror, just like ominous music of like different sounds to create tension and stuff. But like the soundtrack, there's like a lot of cool like 80s and 90s music that's like super like I don't even know how to describe it. It's just like I it's like Tears for Fears. Let me look up the song real quick. Tears for Fears, Head Over Heels is when there is a scene where they're like walking through the school hallway. And ever since I saw it or listened to it in the movie, like I literally have been walking around campus, listening to this song over and over again. And then there was another song, Under the Milky Way by The Church, which I don't ever think I've heard of The Church. I don't know if they're 90s or 80s, but the music was super, super fun. And I didn't think it took away from the movie. I think it made it a lot better. That's just
yeah.
like a weird thing, like a weird comment, I guess. is that
Right.
I noticed like the '80s music in it, and I like love the '80s music. So I
The
don't know if
whole the whole like aesthetic of the movie is so cool. Like just like what they're wearing, like most of the time, he's just wearing like, a plain t-shirt or something, but it's just like kind of what everybody's wearing, just like the kind of like the colors and stuff like that. Like it's just a really, really good movie to look at. And
yeah, the color
and
palette is definitely like there's a lot of blues, definitely a lot
yeah,
of
the
blues.
blacks and blues. So it was um and honestly the biggest like surprise, like if you're like debating whether to watch this movie or not, like it's insanely funny for like being like such a dark kind of weird movie. It's one of the like most funny movies that like unintentionally funny at sometimes like that you could watch.
Yeah,
Like there's one-liners and like just like the characters and stuff. Like it almost like doesn't take itself too seriously at some points where it's like, okay, it's not above like some of these jokes that they're cracking and stuff. And it's really and there's like situational irony and it's great. And I think the characters have a lot to do with that in the script for sure.
yeah, definitely for sure. I agree with that 100%. I mean, that's kind of
That's
it
about it.
for like spoiler free. Like that's as much as we can say because it's just really hard to explain the movie
Yeah. So
without like just dumping all this information of like what happened because it's like
so
I look at it as like a puzzle piece
yeah.
and like you don't even know but you don't know it's like a blank puzzle
Yeah.
piece you don't know which piece goes together or not and it's kind of hard to just describe that to somebody.
So
um
if you don't care about spoilers, go ahead and listen. But if you really want to watch it, it's on HBO Max, and I mean, I'm sure you could rent it off really any Amazon or DirecTV or whatever. But we
yeah
highly suggest watching the movie before you listen to the rest of this episode.
yeah
But if you don't care, then go ahead and
if you're one of
listen.
those people that don't that like spoilers and I don't even know how to describe it if you're one of those evil people that like movies being spoiled before you watch them then keep listening but
Even if you are that kind of person, like this is not the movie to do it with. Like I need you to watch this movie like I watched it the first time and just not understand anything. I need
yeah
that personally because you will not understand it. I don't care how smart you are. Like it just doesn't make sense until, a couple YouTube videos, a Reddit thread, and maybe watching it for like five more times. Then you might start to get the idea. But
and you still might not even understand it at that point.
yeah.
It's just like you kind of have to come up with your own conclusion.
Yeah, let's go. So I'll start off. I think you got to start with the opening scene. It's kind of like it's like a tracking. I don't know. Is this a tracking shot or whatever? It just kind of, just the camera's moving through like the hills of wherever they're at, and you just see Donnie just on the ground, and
Yeah, he
I
was
just
like
love that scene.
he's asleep right next to a bike. It's like morning. What's that? What is that? Dawn or
Yeah,
dusk?
yeah,
Dawn.
Don.
Dawn. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So it's dawn. It was filmed in Washington, correct? Is that
Yeah, I
right?
think so. Yeah,
So it opens up and this music's playing. You don't really know what's going on, and then it just he gets up, gets on his bike, and then rides his bike home. And it's a weird intro because you like have no idea what's going on, and then it kind of just starts as like that
yeah, and
stereotypical like running or riding on your bike through the neighborhood and showing all the neighbors and all the characters that are going to be in the film. But
yeah.
like
There's like
the first part
some,
is like he's asleep on the ground on top of a like a mountain
yeah.
at like in the morning.
And you have no idea what's going on. He rides his bike home. He goes through the like the back of the house, and his mom's like reading a book. And then he goes inside. He goes into the fridge, and on the fridge it says, "Where is Donnie?" Like question mark. So it's like you kind of get this idea that like this is kind of like a recurring thing. So yeah, I thought the beginning was super cool. I mean, it kind of is just like you're kind of getting the vibes of just like what's going on. You're not really understanding what's going on, and then you know,
So I guess let's just move on to like the meat and the potatoes of like the main part that we want to talk about because we could go through the whole movie.
Yeah, exactly. I just
But
wanted to talk about the opening scene because I just think it's super cool. Like I could watch that just all day. It's just like him strolling through.
so should we talk about the ending first? Because the ending is like, all right. So here, let me just explain this the best way possible. So a while one night, Donnie wakes up and because he sleepwalks, and he's also like a schizophrenic. He sees things, and when he sleepwalks, like almost every time he sleepwalks is when he sees stuff, and you don't know if he's sleeping or if he's like if it's real or if it's just like a schizophrenia thing. And so the first time they kind of does that in the film, he wakes up, walks to a golf course, and a guy in a big bunny suit with the creepy mask tells him,
Frank.
Frank, that there's 28 days and like it's a really specific time, like 28 days, 12 hours or something, and until the world ends. And then he wakes up, and then you're kind of like, what does that even mean? And so when Donnie wakes up, and because he fell asleep in the golf course, he goes home to find that a plane engine is it an engine?
Yeah, it's one of those side engines, like the giant, you know, propeller
Yeah,
thing.
a plane engine fell through the house and into his room. So if he was not, if he didn't sleepwalk to the golf course, then he would have died. So that's just something like super important where you think about later. Um, so he would have died if Frank didn't kind of save him or wake him up. And in the movie, he has these visions, and Frank kind of tells him a bunch of different things to do, like the bunny guy. And so one of them is like break a pipe in the school to flood the school, and then he what does he do after that? I
Well,
can't.
okay, so I kind of have the timeline right here. So first off, so you kind of get this idea that Frank is guiding him, is his guide. So like Frank will occur whether it's in his dreams or whatever, and Frank tells him to do something, and Donnie just feels, I don't know if he feels obligated, but Donnie listens to whatever Frank says because he knows that Frank saved his life. Because Frank told him to go to the golf course, told him to follow me, said that the world is ending in 28 days. So now he's just listening to everything Frank says because it saved his life. Otherwise, he would have died. So first, Frank saves him from Donnie, and what you're going to find out is this kind of opened like the tangent universe, which we'll get into like that whole thing, but not right now. So
Yeah,
next is he floods the school and sticks that axe in the mascot.
which
And what
was made out of metal, so that's obviously not
Yeah, and
physically possible.
there's a big sign that said like they made me do it, which
And you
but
don't see Donnie doing it. It just like
yeah,
implies that he
it's
did it, but
implies.
you know that he
And
did it.
what that leads to is he meets Gretchen. Because the school floods, then everybody's walking home and he sees Gretchen, and then that's where he really gets to talk to Gretchen. And
And
um
Gretchen is his girlfriend in the
yeah,
movie, kind of
well,
like
yeah.
the
So
love interest.
it's a new girl at school, which I mean that even goes into some things because she's a new girl at school. Like this is another like one of those coincidence things is like what had to happen for her to end up at the school in the first place is kind of crazy. Of like her dad stabbed her mom, and then they obviously got a divorce, and then now she's at a new area in a new school, and
They
like
had to change her last name too.
yeah, she had to change her last name. So she's, her and Donnie, start going out as they say, and then
Donnie is
um,
not. Donnie's not even like a normal guy too, so he's like
no,
super weird. But for
he's weird
her, I
with it,
guess
but it's funny,
it's
and
funny and it's kind of charming to her. I can see because she was like they're both portrayed as like the outcast,
yeah,
but they connect through that way. And I think that Donnie being kind of like mentally ill and super weird, it connects with her like traumatic past
yeah,
with her
and
family.
it's really funny. And I wrote this quote down because I really liked it. She goes, "Donnie Darko, what are you, a superhero or something?" Talking about his name, and he goes, "What makes you think I'm not?" And that is a great line because you find out at the end, which I mean, this is a spoiler review. He saves the day. and I think this movie is more about Donnie saving the day or saving everybody than it is like the world ending. It's like
Yeah.
Donnie Darko is a superhero in a way, in a weird way. He's like the chosen one, like the world revolves around him kind of thing. And I just really like that line when they're walking by. She's like, "What are you, a superhero?" Because Donnie Darko, I think we both agree, is like one of the dopest names.
Donnie Darko is a sick name.
So
The way it flows and just slides off the tongue.
exactly. So then, so that was the school incident, and then there's. Do you want to talk about what's his name in the actual?
Well, I guess
Um,
one thing that I wanted to say, you said that he follows Frank's what Frank tells him to do because Frank saved his life, and I also would like to add that Donnie struggles with like his purpose a lot in the film,
yeah.
and so like Frank telling him and giving him the responsibility of the world is ending and you have to save it. You have to be
Hmm.
the one. But he doesn't directly say that, but
Right. Because
he
Donnie's
tells him,
biggest fear is that he dies alone. Like that's his biggest thing. So he doesn't, and right, or dying alone, but dying without knowing his purpose is kind of like
yeah,
his biggest fear.
and that's a reoccurring theme that kind of like pushes Donnie to do what he does because what he's doing, he doesn't really know how important it is or
Until
the
afterwards.
significance of everything until the very end. But he does it because it's like giving him something to do, like a responsibility, because
Exactly.
otherwise he would just be like a normal kid.
Well, that's another thing with the walk with Gretchen, was she's like, "Man, isn't it a bummer that like the school's flooded?" And he's like, "No, because then we would have never had this walk. You know, we would have never had this talk." So, and that's when he asks her out. So, like, that's a very important part. You know what I mean? But he didn't know when he was, basically destroying the school that like that's what it'd lead to. But he just kind of trusted it and went along with it. Then the next thing, so I think we got to talk about this about Patrick Swayze's character because he
It's a good like yin and yang scenario, like the two different sides of the spectrum. Like Donnie is like a social outcast. People look at him and just see that he's different, and then like Patrick Swayze's character is like a stereotypical like religious person that pushes their religion onto other people and like their views, and people like
yeah, because
manipulates
it's not
people
even yeah
into
exactly, and
like
it's not even
believing. Maybe it's not religious, but
well so the way I see it is Patrick Swayze's character is this person that like is or
he
he has like a book and he has an idea and it's like he's right and basically he lumps everything into love and fear. So if if you're acting out in school, that's because you have fear, like you're a fearful
yeah.
person. And basically, and I like how you said religion because like these he's taught like he's a god like in this school, especially by the PE teacher or the older teacher.
Hmm.
She like is obsessed with him and she thinks everything that he says should just be like the way. And I think that's important to like what goes on ahead. So basically there's this Jim Cunningham is the character, is Patrick Swayze's character, and there's this scene, the auditorium scene, where he's calling out all these kids, where one of the kids is like, I'm worried about my sister's weight, and he's like, well, it's because you're scared and stuff like that. So
Yeah, he ties like he makes life into two categories. So like if
yeah,
you're doing things right and you're like happy, then that means you're living your life in love. And if you're like unhappy or like I guess just unsatisfied with how things are going or how other people are in your life, that means you're like living your life in fear, which is completely just
and
wrong. Living your life and putting two things into two different categories is just it's not realistic because there's so many different emotions and so many different factors that play
right.
into everything.
And Donnie calls
And
him out on that, and that's
yeah, he
that's a
does.
great scene where the music's going, and he basically stands up and he calls him the Antichrist, which is why I also think that's like really important because he's like, he's trying, he thinks he's do Patrick Swayze's character like thinks he's doing the right thing, but
But
we know
he's
he's
preaching that like the full human emotion is obviously filled with many different things other than love and fear.
Right.
So to just dehumanize people and to put and to ignore every other emotion and to put things into just two categories and to say you're either doing this or you're doing this, love or fear,
Feel.
uh yeah, fear, then it's just like it's taking away from every other emotion. And I think that's what everybody else just misses that, and Donnie is the only one that kind of like understands that.
Yeah, because they're cheering for this guy. They're like, "Oh yeah, that's really interesting," and like no one's thinking for themselves, which is also like kind of another thing of like like and so that brings me to this. So then Donnie gets kicked out. Obviously, he goes and he finds Jim Cunningham, Patrick Swayze's his
he
wallet.
he finds his wallet, so he knows where he lives, and then Frank tells him in like a dream sequence or like a vision sequence, I guess we can call it, or one of the schizophrenia episodes, that
Yeah.
to burn down his house. And
Hmm.
so after Donnie burns down his house, the firefighters find like a stash of child pornography and stuff like that. So it's this cool like thing, like contrast of like everybody thinks what's Jim Cunningham is his name?
Jim Cunningham's the
Jim
Patrick Swayze
Cunningham is like held as this like
saint.
this saint, and then it's obviously taken away when they find out that he's an actual terrible person.
Yeah.
So like
And it's because of Donnie that like people find that. So like all these things like and that's the whole thing. That's another theme that they talk about in the movie is destruction is a form of creation. So everything Donnie destroys, whether it be the school or um, a house or whatever, that destruction causes the creation of love with Gretchen and causes the creation of like, oh, you get to actually see what this guy is really like on the inside. Literally the inside of his house. You get to see what he's like. So that was really cool. That's kind of like with the timeline, and then I feel like,
so
dude,
I know this is like, I guess, trying to think about what we're saying and how it ties into the full story. We're trying to explain like things that happen and the time that they happen. And I know
yeah.
that that's not making a lot of sense, and it's because it
Well,
doesn't.
hopefully you've seen the movie by this point. So
Yeah,
if
it
you've seen the
doesn't.
movie by this, exactly.
These things are just like in the movie, things just happen, and we just watch them and try to like. And obviously, at the end, it ties everything together and it makes sense. But like when you explain it from the beginning to end, you won't get it until the end, just like in the movie. So I guess that's
So
just what I'm trying to say is
yeah,
it's
and
it's it's weird to explain it from the first sequence to the second sequence because they
right,
don't really connect until the very end.
and I think a point. I think what we can start getting into now is the time travel aspect because that plays a big role. So him and his dad are driving, and this is also after the his dad's taking him home from school, and they're going obviously to their house, which this is also important. Like the direction, like you kind of understand how this town is set up, where it's like school, and then this old lady's house, and basically his dad almost kills this girl or kills this old lady, which they end up calling Grandma Death. But basically, like her whole thing is she walks just back and forth to her mailbox, and that's all she does all day. Is she just walks back and forth to her mailbox, and you find out that she actually wrote this book called The Philosophy of Time Travel. And basically, like Donnie is able to get his hands on it because she was an ex-teacher and she passed it down to one of the teachers that Donnie's close with. So he reads The Philosophy of Time Travel, and after reading that, it almost like he almost has like this huge understanding, or like he has an understanding of like how time travel works, and so like he kind of understands what's been going on more. So he starts seeing these portals, at sometimes seeing these, or what do we want to call them, like weren't
They're
timelines.
they're like, I guess, to paint a picture for our audience if you haven't seen it. It's like this, like where, like, let's say like I'm gonna get up and walk somewhere. It's like a line that I would
It's a
walk on that
it's a
says my path. So
it's,
like
it's a predetermined path. So it's like you're set like in which has to do with another big theme, which is fate, where It's basically predicting where you're going to go because that's where you're going to go. So if you're going
Yeah,
to the
so
fridge, this line per se will go to the fridge, and it just you just follow it. But no one knows that they're doing that, but it knows that's the path you're going to take.
yeah, the theory of like predetermination. So everything that we live or experience in our life has already been decided. Like our how our life plays out has already been played out or and it's already been decided and everything is just kind of like we just live our life. It's like I don't know how to it's kind of a
No, no,
it's
it's
it's,
hard
it's a
to.
very complex thing to explain that I do not know how to I guess say very well, but
So and that's what I'll say. So he's talking with his professor, and there's this big scene where, or it's not a big scene, but basically they're talking. He's talking to his professor because he's trying to get some information out of him of like, well, like talking about these lines coming out of people's chests. He's telling him basically that he sees those or that like is that kind of what it looks like, and the teachers, agreeing, but like the teacher's like basically saying that he can't say anymore. And here's the quote. Or so what Donnie's trying to explain is if I can see these lines of where I'm gonna go, can't I just go somewhere else and like break it? Right?
yeah,
That's basically
so
what he's saying.
um going off that, it's like if I know that my what my future holds is like I'm going to go walk to, this building and I know that I'm going to do that next. I could decide not to walk that building to that building and then change my future. So it gives people the choice to change their path and predetermination it would erase that.
Yeah, and then the teacher basically explains, well, it wouldn't be fate if you go against it, right? Like then your path would just be that way, and that's
Yeah.
not how it works. And then Donnie says, well, not if we travel within God's channel. And then that just the scene ends there, and then it's just kind of like, okay, now that's another thing I have to Google because like what is he talking about? And basically, and this is what the internet says. It says Donnie is saying that if there is a God, even knowing your future wouldn't make a difference if God had predetermined your actions. So it's basically talking about like free will and like if you knew the knowledge, if you had the knowledge of the future, like you know what I mean? And then that's where this movie gets really confusing is because, you know, um like all this time stuff of like because if you notice when he was seeing these lines go, his line was going upstairs to the gun,
Yeah.
right? And he doesn't get up out of his chair at first. And it like comes back around and like points its finger and like, no, 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 you gotta follow me. So then that's when he gets up and goes. But like so he kind of has this like ability to obviously see these things, but also like he kind of gave a little pushback on that. Which here's another thing that I have a question of is like everybody's was like going to the fridge or whatever. It's like a path, but like this of like something they were wanting to do. So like I'm hungry, my little line is gonna go to the fridge. But like Donnie had no idea. I don't even know if he knew there was a gun there. It's just like his path just took him there, and it's kind
Yeah.
of like it's kind of weird. But then
You kind of
then
you kind of think about like what is this like existential force that is telling Donnie to do these things, and
right.
it's you can say it's God or you can say it's Frank the bunny guy, but you really don't know, and you really don't ever kind of find out.
Exactly. And you kind of find out or this isn't even from me watching, but this is just like videos I've seen and stuff is you realize the reason Grandma Death or Roberta Sparrow is her actual name is you realize she's going back and forth all day to the mailboxes because she's stuck in that time loop. Like there's kind of like a time loop where it's just bringing her back and forth, and it's because you find out she's probably waiting on a letter from Donnie that he writes to her because he writes her a letter after he reads the Philosophy of Time Travel, her book, and he writes her a letter, and so she's just going back and I guess she's waiting for that letter. I don't know. It's kind of that's kind of what you can kind of infer is she's stuck on on a time loop of just going back and forth following it, and that's all she does.
Yeah. And so I guess to wrap it all up, to give the ending. So Donnie just there's like 6 hours left until the world ends. So the movie kind of just keeps a clock and tells you how much time is left until the world is supposed to end. And so with 6 hours left, they go to Grandma Death's house to the cellar door because previously in another scene, the one of his teachers says cellar door is the most important word in or the most interesting word in the human language, which
Right.
is that's from I think like a philosopher, like an actual
Mhm.
philosopher. And she says that, and so that's what he does. He goes to the cellar door in her house to try to find something, and that's where they find like the bullies of the school, and they get in a little fight,
Wait,
and
hold
then
on. Can I say one thing?
yeah, go ahead.
So, still going down the timeline. So after the whole Patrick Swayze, like once he got arrested, well, then they have a talent show, and um, his little sister is in like this dance thing, and
Oh
they're in a
yeah,
dance
I
competition.
completely
And so
skipped that part.
this kind of brings it to the end because this is also important. So she's in a Sparkle Motion, or Sparkle Motion is the name of her like dance team, and they end up winning the whole show, and that means they have the opportunity to go to like the regional thing in Los Angeles. And because one of the teachers, is obsessed with this Patrick Swayze, she can't chaperone the team. So Mrs. Darko, Donnie's mom, gets volunteered to go on the trip. So that's when they leave on a plane, and then Donnie's dad is out of town. So then that leaves it up to Jake Gyllenhaal and his older sister, because she just got admitted into Harvard. That means they can throw a party. So like all these things had to happen. Like that's another destruction creation thing of like, okay, now the mom is out of town. They throw this party. That party led to them going over to the cellar door, and then I'll let you pick up. But basically, what you're finding out is the mom and the daughter, uh, Donnie's sister and mom, they're coming back basically in 6 hours. They'll be in the plane that the engine falls on his house from the beginning, but they weren't. So go
Yeah,
ahead.
so I guess to re-say what I already said. So they're in the cellar door at the Grandma Death's house. They find the bullies. They get in a fight, and then a car pulls up and runs over Gretchen, Donnie's girlfriend, and kills her. And then the bullies run away. And then who gets out of the car is a guy dressed up as a clown and Frank, the bunny suit guy. And when that happens, it's like one of those weird reveals where you're like, wait, what? Because I thought this whole time he was like an existential ghost or like
Yeah, he was
a vision,
fake. Yeah,
but he's a real person. And Donnie shoots him and kills him, and that's when you kind of find out that it was like his Frank was a real person, but who was talking to Donnie this whole time was like his ghost.
right.
And so Donnie tells the kid who's dressed as a clown to run away. He's unimportant anyway. And then he goes back to his house carrying Gretchen's dead body. He takes the keys from the house and then drives the car to the mountain that he was at the beginning of the film. And kind of like the shot of him driving, pulling out of his driveway, there's like a wormhole or like a portal like above his house, forming above his
Yeah,
house. And then it he goes to that hill and kind of watches everything unfold above his house, and then it then kind of cuts to the whole film, but it's going backwards, so it's conveying that
it's reversing everything that he
reversing
was. Yeah,
everything. And so you then go back to Donnie the night of the plane engine hitting his room. He's sitting in his bed laughing. So obviously he knows what is about to happen. He knows what,
he
and he's
knows he had to
laughing.
make this sacrifice. He
He
realized
know
that. Yeah,
he knows that like everything that Frank told him to do had a purpose now, and that he fulfilled what he was supposed to do, and he like saved the world because I read this today and I wrote this down. A tangent universe exists with when a fourth dimension is corrupted. So that's kind of what happened when the plane engine hits his room originally, and Donnie survives.
Yeah,
So
and it's because like if you watch in the beginning, when once the plane engine hit, obviously his mom and sister weren't in the plane because they were there at the house, and you hear on the news, if you listen to the news, it's like they don't know where the plane came from, they don't like have an engine, like they don't know what it's linked to, but then you find out that like that's part of like Frank is what the internet calls the manipulated dead, which if you're the manipulated dead, that means you died in the tangent universe. And the tangent universe started as soon as Donnie didn't die when he was supposed to, which was at the
yeah,
beginning of the film. So that's kind of how it all kind of ties up at the end of you kind of realize that,
this
you
all
know,
was within a tangent universe, and so you might think like, what is a tangent universe? What's the importance, and why do they need to stop it? Because and basically, what I read is it's highly unstable. It's a highly unstable construct that exists for only a short amount of time, and if it collapses, it has the possibility of a black hole. And of course, we don't know much about black holes, and this is just a movie that somebody wrote. But obviously, a black hole, it sucks everything into it, and you don't know what really happened. So that would obviously destroy. If there was a black hole at the center of Earth, everybody would die, or we don't know what would
right.
happen. It's it's a
But
mystery.
exactly.
It's
And so basically like Donnie realizes that like this is like it's unsustainable. Like he can't keep living like this. Otherwise, like it's just gonna break because of all these
yeah,
things happening.
the
So
tangent universe will destroy the primary universe, which is like reality.
yeah, exactly.
And so what Donnie has basically done in the film, while it doesn't make sense while it's happening, everything that he has done, like flooding the school and like burning Patrick Swayze's house, and doing all those things, has lined it up where he saves the primary universe from the tangent universe. And I guess the tangent event that kind of creates all this is when the mom and the when Mrs. Darko and Donnie's sister, are flying back from the dance competition, and then the black hole sucks their plane engine, and then the plane engine hits the house from the past, and then that kind of begins everything.
Yeah,
So that's kind of like basically a good, I think, rendition of what happens.
yeah.
Put in a pretty sophisticated way where it kind of makes sense.
And
But
there's still questions. Obviously, there's still a lot of questions because you it's hard to understand. Well, then why did Frank save Donnie in the first place? But
yeah,
it
because
needed to happen because it. What you're saying, I guess, is that in this tangent universe, like, well, what? How
so
would you answer that?
it's
Why did Frank save Donnie in the first place if Donnie had to kill himself in the end?
Yeah, so it's a
Anyways,
weird thing. So obviously, in the beginning of the film, Frank saves Donnie by telling that by he sleepwalks out of the house and says the world is going to end, and then the whole movie is about him preventing that. But you think about, if all that had to happen was Donnie dying and that the plane engine hitting his room, then why did Frank do that in the first place?
exactly.
And it's a weird thing to think about. Like, I don't know really how to answer that, because there really is no answer. It
So
makes no sense.
I think
But it also it 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 makes sense that Donnie had to do everything that he had to do to prevent everything from happening. But it when you think about it, all the stuff didn't have to happen in the first place if Donnie just Frank didn't tell Donnie to do anything, and he just stayed there.
exactly, and I think I have my own theory on this, and this is something that I've just kind of thought of. Is it goes back to, I mean, you could talk about like alternate universes and stuff in tangent universes, but I think Donnie's biggest fear was to die alone without a purpose. And if at the beginning of the movie the plane engine just hits and kills him, his biggest fear would have happened of he didn't know his purpose. He would have just died basically alone. You know what I mean? He was in fights with his mom because the last thing he says is and this is quoting the movie, like his mom leaves his room and he calls her a bitch. Like
Yeah,
that, you remember that? Like he's reading, he's like, "Get out of my room." You know, he's not in a good relationship. Like he he would have died alone basically at the beginning of the movie had the plane just hit him. So I think doing all this stuff by Frank saving him, like opening up this tangent universe, like it gives, like we said during the middle of it, is like he gives Donnie purpose, and like in just 28 days, he finds love. He unveils all these things. Like I think it kind of Donnie's fate of like finding purpose happens, and then he gets to save the world. Like he's a superhero. Like he's that makes him the hero at the end. When as like most of the movie, you would have seen him as the villain. But
Yeah, Donnie is Frank makes Donnie a catalyst for saving the world, but in this journey of him saving the world, he also completes his character arc of finding his purpose. So I guess that's my answer to why Donnie had to do what he did and they didn't just kill him off.
and
Is
these are all kind of theories, because I mean, obviously, like none of this, like we read this on the internet, but like it's not really said in the movie. And I know we've talked about there's a director's cut that kind of explains more. Some people like it more, some people don't like it as much because they like it being a little ambiguous. But I think even there's interviews of Jake Gyllenhaal saying like, I don't really understand the ending. I don't understand it. And I think a lot of it is supposed to, for us to interpret of like what's the deeper meaning, what are the themes, and it's like every time you watch the movie you find something else that like might sway you a different way.
yeah. So the themes I would say are like uh well, like predetermination is a big theme.
Yeah,
Like
love, even love
purpose
and
is a big
fear.
theme. Like love and fear obviously is a big theme. Donnie is fearful of
I
not
mean,
having a purpose.
even things like mental health and like worshiping false things, you know what
False
I mean?
idols. I mean, I guess the only example I can think of, like Hitler and how like people of Germany followed him,
Yeah.
and then obviously he's not. He's a terrible person. He killed millions of people. And in the movie, Ian Cunningham is hailed as this like person that's like amazing and has got a perfect life, but obviously in the
Yeah, he had so much influence over people and no one knew like what he was about, you know
and
what I
people
mean?
blindly followed what he said, and
Exactly.
also it ended up he's not a good person. He's a predator.
Oh, yeah, and it's kind of like the themes of, or just like the one of the Drew Barrymore's character, she's a teacher. She ends up getting fired for like teaching, you know, trying to teach people not to follow these types of people.
Yeah,
Like she was doing she was, promoting literature that is helpful for, people like Donnie that like needed it. And I think another big thing that we haven't even mentioned is throughout this whole movie, Donnie is seeing a therapist.
yeah.
And those are some of the greatest scenes and some of the most emotional scenes, especially towards the end.
I mean, there's so many characters that we left out, but
Oh,
I think we're just trying to like tackle the big things because it's
yeah,
so hard. This movie is just so
it's
complex.
impossible.
There's so many characters that we just haven't mentioned, and their different character arcs. But
His friends. I mean, we could go more into like Gretchen, but the therapist. Some of the therapist scenes are hilarious because he's like, "Oh, I met a friend today," and she's like, "Real or imaginary?" And he goes, "Imaginary," talking about Frank and um, But at the end, it's like super emotional when like he sees Frank in her office and he's just crying, holding that stuffed animal, and
yeah,
it's sad. And but I don't know. It's good. It's so good.
so to wrap this all up, because I think we're kind of getting to that
Yeah,
point where we're
I think
just
we've
kind of
talked.
rambling, and we've talked about the theories and everything. This movie, I guess, ignoring all the complexities and all the mystery about it, has a lot to do with like finding purpose for
Mhm.
yourself, and not like forming your own opinion, being your own person, instead of like blindly following something.
Yeah,
And I
which
guess
is ironically what is what
was
Donnie
yeah,
does.
So it's just like it's just such a weird movie because the themes like they
Contradict
challenge
each other. Yeah.
they contradict each other and they challenge each other, but they're also like they're good themes like find purpose, but Donnie finds purpose in blindly following a bunny rabbit.
Right.
And
Yeah.
then
Right.
it also is like don't always listen to what people say, blindly follow them, but also inform your own opinion and all this because the person that you listen to or the things that you know might believe are false.
And
But
like there's themes of love and fear, but it's like it's more complicated than that. It's like stuff like that. But there's a Jake Gyllenhaal quote, and this is what I'll end on. He says, "The job of art is to disturb the comfortable and comfort the disturbed." That's one of my favorite quotes from him, or just in general, because it's like that's what this movie does. It's like meant to, if you're comfortable where you're at, it's trying to weird you out. It's trying to make you uncomfortable. But if you're like a disturbed, if there's something going on, it's like this movie is comforting in that way of like, oh, I can relate to Donnie Darko even though I'm not like schizophrenic. It's like I get what he's going through, and like it's comforting. Like he's not really scared of Frank, even though Frank is like kind of terrifying. He's like he doesn't really know what to do, and so he just like he just kind of goes with it, and
I mean, I'm
it's
sure everybody
beautiful.
struggles with their purpose and like
Mhm.
why do we wake up every day and why do we do what we do? And even as both of us are in college right now, what are we? Why are we in college right now? And trying to get an education. Like, what are we trying to do with our life, and what's the purpose of everything? And I think that just this movie it has to deal with that, and I think that's a good theme for people to experience. And I think just the other themes of forming your own opinion and being your own person is just super important. So minus all the time travel and the tangent universe stuff, I think that this movie has good central themes that
Yeah.
people can just generally use for their lives. And also it's just a super good film that's confusing. And I think just having a conversation even on the podcast with you, I think that's like the point of everything is
Yeah.
you want people to like obviously the director Richard Kelly, he wanted people to talk about it. He wanted people to have this conversation and talk about these things and dissect it because I'm sure
And it's
that's
it's
like
it's
the point.
definitely a movie that's gonna stick around forever because like I read this thing, it was like this movie was ahead of its time and it was before its time. Like there was really no movie like it before it, and there has not been a movie like it after it. Like it's just it has this movie has its spot like just in the world. And I think that's why I gravitate so much towards it. Is like I'm never gonna watch a movie like obviously Christopher Nolan drops all these crazy movies, Inception, Interstellar, but it's like they're not as weird or as personal as Donnie Darko is, and that's why I love this movie so much. And I'm just glad I got to see it. And I love like talking to
I'm
somebody that just saw it for the first time. You know what I
Yeah, I'm
mean? And
glad
I
you
want to.
recommended it. I would
Yeah,
have watched
exactly.
it. Maybe I would have watched it. Maybe I wouldn't. But I'm happy that you recommended it because you know having a movie, watching a movie, and then thinking about it for the next 3 days and trying to figure out and watching all these videos is like it's like one of the best things for me.
Yeah,
Is like
exactly. And it's not for everybody. Like I'm sure. Like, I mean, again, please watch this movie and form your own opinion,
form your own
and
opinion.
let us know if you hate this movie. If you want to watch it 6 more times, like I don't know, but just watch and form your own opinion. And
And
thank you for
honestly,
making it this far because hopefully you've seen the movie by this point. But
maybe obviously we're talking about these themes that are in the movie and all these things that we think happened, but we might be wrong. We
yeah, oh yeah, exactly.
like we might just be think coming up with random things to try to make everything that happened in the movie make sense. So if you guys have any other thoughts or you interpreted it a different way or you saw different themes than us, I'm
Dude,
obviously
I just thought of this, and when you just said that, like maybe it's not supposed to make sense. There's a him and Gretchen do like a class project, and they had to like come up with like an invention that would change the world or whatever. And their invention was they're gonna put glasses on babies, and like in these glasses, like you can you can put pictures in them and of whatever the parents want, whether it's of the parents of rainbows or whatever, and it's supposed to develop their memories earlier. And the teacher said, he was like, well, what if babies are just not supposed to see anything? Like, what if that's part of their growth is to not have all that exposure so early? And then it's just like, there's so many scenes like that in the movie of like, it's just so deep and you like can't catch it all in one sitting.
Or
So it's
maybe or maybe it's not deep and we're just like overthinking it.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. It's like, what if we're the babies? Like, we're not supposed to, we're not supposed to look into it. Like, we're not supposed to get this deep about it. It's
It's
just
not
like,
supposed to make sense. It's not the
yeah,
purpose of it is not what we think.
and that's why it's so good. It's so good.
All right. Now that we've talked about, spoiler free, spoiler review,
Yeah,
out of 5 stars, what is your rating? That's the rating system, by the way, that we're going to use is the 5 out of 5 stars. So one
yeah,
is one, or I guess we could do half a star, and
yeah.
then 5 star is the best review, half star is the worst.
Um, I'll go first. On Letterbox, I gave this 5 stars, and I think personally, it's going to be 5 stars for me. I think there's it's it's everything I look for in a movie, but I only want to see it in this movie kind of thing. It's like, as far as like impact and stuff, I gotta give it 5 stars. I mean, I could give it 4.5, but like it's just that, like, to me. So I'm gonna give it 5 stars, even though that's like the coveted review, but like we're kind of starting off hot on that thing. So but yeah, what about you?
Uh, so I need more time to digest everything because I only
Yeah,
saw it a few days ago, and I obviously want to rewatch it. But if I had to rate it right now, I would give it a 4.5 stars, and it
yeah,
might go up, might go down. I don't
yeah,
know.
exactly.
But right now, I think it's pretty solid 4.5. I really, really enjoyed it. I just I love movies that are like super weird, and that's exactly what it was. I
Yep,
love the performances. I love the way that it looked. Just aesthetically, it looked really nice. And I love thinking about it. I think that's super interesting, and the music was super good. So 4.5 stars is my rating. Um, yeah, Donnie Darko.
Donnie
Watch it and
Darko.
form your own opinion.
Watch and form your own opinion now. To close out, do you want to give any like recommendations of like a show you're watching or like any movies that you think we're gonna watch, or do we want to go ahead and set up next week just so like, or maybe not next week, but our next episode? You want to go ahead and confirm that just so they can watch it before we talk about it?
Yeah.
I
Do you
know,
wanna do you
I
wanna
know this is
agree?
kind of like on the spot, but
What do you want to watch next? We can watch a movie that we both haven't seen, or we can watch a movie that I've seen and you haven't, since we did that for the first time.
Yeah, we can do that. I mean, if whatever you suggest, I'll go with. I kind of picked this one. So if you want to pick one that you've seen, and then I can watch it for the first time, and then the week after, we'll do one that we both haven't seen. But it's up to you.
All right. All right. So I guess the audience won't know that we took a short break so I could think about this. But the next movie that we're going to be talking about is a Martin Scorsese film, King of Comedy with Robert De Niro.
Oh, let's go! I'm so excited. I've
Have
never
you
seen it.
you've
I've
never
never
seen it?
seen it. I've never seen it. I'm so excited.
Uh, I think this is a movie that's one of Scorsese's best, but people don't ever really talk about it or consider it one of the best.
Hmm.
But it is definitely like top two in my Scorsese book. It is amazing, and a lot of movies take inspiration from it, and we can talk about that in the next episode. So,
And I just want to say this. I think this is going to be kind of a common theme with this podcast is we're not gonna be suggesting Jurassic Park, like movies that like everybody's seen. You know what I mean. Like, I think that's what's going to set us apart is that we're encouraging people to watch movies that you know that are good, that fly under the radar, that like, that really makes you think. Like I'm really excited. I've heard King of Comedy is one of these movies. Um, I've heard really good things about it, but I don't even know what it's about, which is kind of why I'm excited, because
Yeah,
I'm gonna go
super.
in with an open mind. I'm gonna watch and form my own opinion.
Yeah, I'm gonna rewatch it for this, but
And this one, I feel it's going to be a little easier to have a podcast about than Donnie Darko.
yeah, Donnie Darko is super super
If
great.
it seemed like we were just throwing crap at the wall, it's because like we came prepared with notes, and it's still like,
Yeah, I got a full page of like things that I wanted to talk about, and thinking about what we talked about. I hope it makes sense. I hope people got what we were trying to talk about
yeah,
and trying to say.
and especially if they've seen the movie, then they'll kind of understand what it's going through. But yeah, please let us know if you've seen the movie, Donnie Darko. That is, let us know if you liked it. Let us know how we did, what we can do better with, and we'll see you next podcast with King of Comedy.
Before we move on, I want to say that we are also gonna watch the Batman movie and the new movies that come out.
Yeah, exactly. We'll
So,
see. We'll
because
see
I
movies
don't,
that come up. We're gonna be watching new movies. Yeah, I get. What I was saying was, like, these older movies. Like, for now, like, we'll be reviewing some. We might even, talk about movies that a lot of people have seen. It's just whatever we feel like. But yeah, we'll definitely be seeing the new movies. Batman, I'm super excited for.
yep.
Ambulance, even.
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I'll wait for it to come out on DVD, like a
Streaming, or
streaming
yeah, it's
service.
gonna be on Netflix or something for sure.
All right, but thank you guys for listening. If you made it this far, congrats. I appreciate you. Definitely watch Donnie Darko if you haven't seen it. And for next week, so we don't, talk about a movie that you guys haven't seen, watch King of Comedy. I don't know if it's on any streaming services, but I think it's really cheap on Amazon Prime to rent. That's it. Thank you guys for listening.
Thank you.
All right. See you guys next week.